about Joe Buck. From your standpoint, in your opinions, I hated everything that came out of the guy's mouth during the World Series. So my question to you is, was he just all Cubs, or am I just an oversensitive Cleveland Indians fan?
When we're fans watching the game, we're the ones who are biased, myself included. I try not to be, I take a lot of pride, I think, in not being biased on the air. But as a fan, when I'm sitting at home, I was watching the same World Series when the Indians got off to the 3-1 lead. I'm like, what's with Buck? He's rooting for the Indians. I'm saying that in my head, even though I know that's not true. The reality is that Joe Buck doesn't care who wins. He's looking for the story. He wanted a 7-game series, I'm sure. So probably a 3-1. He probably did want the Cubs to win because he probably wanted a 7-game series. But if the Indians were down 3-1, he would have wanted the same thing. So I don't buy. I think we're all the ones who are biased as fans. I don't buy that Joe Buck was biased. I know people got upset about the Schwarber story. But if the same thing had happened on the Indians, it's an amazing story. If Michael Brantley had not played all year and then played in the World Series and done well, they would have gone nuts about that too.
You know, Fox is trying to appeal to a nationwide audience. They're trying to get the casual sports fan to watch the World Series. And the way to do that is to talk about the Cubs. I mean, that being said, I think that they probably spent, 75% of the broadcast focused on what was going on with Chicago. But in the end, you know, I understood from a storyline standpoint where their producers, as much as Joe Buck, were thinking when they put the games on the air. I will say this too, I was at all 7 games of the series, so I really didn't get a chance to watch a ton. But I know that obviously fans felt like Buck was in the bag for the Cubs and was biased against the Indians.
And only the state of Ohio was rooting for the Indians, and every other state in the country was rooting for the Cubs, or were rooting for the Cubs. So I think that, as Aaron said, the producers are catering to a national audience. So I think that affected it.
You know, 1997, the Indians and the Marlins, and that was broadcast by NBC, and Bob Costas. And Costas received criticism from Cleveland fans for rooting for the Marlins. And Costas told me that that's the most absurd thing. First of all, I'm rooting for a 7-game series. But if I'm going to root for anybody, it's going to be the traditional team that's a charter member of the American League since 1901, and not with Miami. In those days, it was the Florida Marlins. And he wouldn't be rooting for a team that just bought the team, bought the roster, and then turned it over, you know, in the off season. So clearly, I think Adam hit it right on the head. That we're the ones who are biased, not the announcers. They just want, you know, I think all of us who've done play-by-play, all we're rooting for is something that'll give us audition tape.